election to be President of the United States of America.
History made in the Windy City as a ticket-topping Kamala Harris offers her Democratic leadership to a deeply divided nation. Will undecided voters in swing states embrace her vision of greater opportunity for all Americans? Here at home, Harris County leaders poised to bypass the ballot box and ratchet up property taxes a whopping 8%. And down at City Hall, a sobering assessment of systemic failure within the Houston Police Department. In the wake of a massive case suspension scandal, will citizens embrace the high cost of fixing what's broken? I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, well-known Houston attorney and conservative commentator Gary Polland. Next up, former Houston City Council member Sue Lovell. In the 3 spot, Holly Hansen, political reporter for the Texan. Batting cleanup, Marcus Davis, acclaimed restaurateur and host of Fish, Grits, and Politics. And closing us out, education and public safety advocate Paul Castro. Let's begin.
Guided by optimism and faith to fight for this country we love, to fight for the ideals we cherish, and to uphold the awesome responsibility that comes with the greatest privilege on earth, the privilege and pride of being an American.
Projecting seasoned confidence honed through a lifetime of service and a core integrity fostered by a single mother who led by example, Vice President Kamala Harris offered a vision of America she promises to deliver with both competence and the courage of her deeply held progressive convictions. That was the pitch in Chicago, and the Democratic Party faithful absolutely loved it. But in this razor-close election, which will be decided by voters in 7 tightly contested swing states, the role played by a former football coach turned populist politician may well prove pivotal in the final outcome.
Leaders don't spend all day insulting people and blaming others. Leaders do the work. It's the 4th quarter. We're down a field goal, but we're on offense and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field. And boy, do we have the right team.
And so 72 days out, here's a couple of critical questions. Can Vice President Harris energize an Obama-like turnout among African Americans, young people, and women concerned about reproductive rights? Can folksy Tim Walz help attract moderate white men who just can't stomach Donald Trump and were contemplating just sitting out this entire election? You know something, Marcus Davis, I'm going to start with you. What was your take on the outpouring of enthusiasm in Chicago and the image and message projected by Kamala Harris?
You know, I notably have been very critical of the Democratic Party and their shortcomings. I watched the convention and I was impressed. You know, part of my challenge with the Democratic Party had been, one, there are several policy issues that I disagree with. 2, I just always found them to be feckless, right? I just found them to not have a spine and wouldn't stand up tall. I saw a different party on this convention where they appeared to stand up and have some testicular fortitude, which was exciting. But the most important thing as an independent, the thing that I appreciated was the attempt to reach out across the aisle and embrace the Republicans, as I call them, the reasonable Republicans, who understand that Donald Trump is not fit for office, and the Democrats have welcomed them in and said, we will join you if you join us. And so that in my opinion, was very favorable.
Gary Polland, did you see a different Democratic Party?
No, I saw a different star. I will say this, I liked her speech, I thought it was good, and I agreed with probably 95% of the platitudes that were in the speech. But, you know, the Democrats, they mentioned Trump 100 times. They talked about the border. I don't think at all. They didn't talk about runaway inflation. They didn't talk about their idiotic ideas for price controls. They don't talk about the world on fire. So if we're going to get this campaign into substance, I think Trump wins. If it's all about personality, heck, I think she's probably more likable than Trump. So if it's personality, we win. Walz, I think Walz is going to end up being an anchor for this ticket. He is the most radical governor in the country. He has done all kinds of terrible things to that state. And so, and he can be folksy all he wants, but he's terrible. So that's kind of where I see it coming. So if it's really on Trump, and if Trump can, if he can focus and talk about issues, the Republicans can win. And if he wants to do insults and personalities, then I think the Republicans lose.
Paul Castro, it's pragmatists, and that's my term, like you, who are going to decide this election. What was your take on the message that came out of Chicago?
I think the message was good. I also think, to previous points, there wasn't enough around policy. The issue is right now, Harris is trailing by 7 points with the working class, and is also trailing where Biden had been with working class members of color. I don't think that the issues around the economy and the border, which are really high in terms of people's interests and concerns, were mentioned enough. And I think that's the thing that if the Democrats are going to close, they have to close with that group. Pennsylvania is going to be critical. Arizona and Nevada are going to be critical. And right now, I think a lot of working class voters, especially those of color, have not shifted. I mean, the fact that she's trailing where Biden was should be deeply concerning to Democrats.
All right, Holly, put your reporter hat on. This thing may come down to Pennsylvania and Georgia. That's if the Democrats can hold places like Michigan.
Right. Well, and I think they did a very good convention. I think Kamala's speech was excellent, and it really appealed to people who want a good vibe and good feelings. But Marcus mentioned fortitude. Fortitude to do what? It was pretty vague on policy specifics. And when we look at some of the policy specifics that are sort of easing out there, we're looking at massive tax hikes. We're looking at price controls. And Paul mentioned some of the key issues. Border security and the economy are very important, especially to those swing voters and to people who are looking at policy and not just good feelings. When we look at those, I think there's a lot of concerns about the Democratic ticket.
I saved Sue for last because Sue was at 8 or 9 of these things. How did this compare?
5 or 6.
5 or 6.
I just had a birthday, but yeah. But I have been, and that's what they are. They're conventions. It's to get the people that are there excited, and a special challenge, a brand new, a candidate that people knew, but she had to introduce herself to her party a lot, and then to the nation, and I thought they did an excellent job. The convention is not about winning the race. They'll flesh all those policies out and go out into the states and talk about them. So very good convention, and the convention, I think, achieved what conventions are supposed to. Introduced her and her running mate, and they did a great job.
All right, hold that thought. Still to come, Harris County's Democratic leaders preparing to make bank on Hurricane Beryl with one-time opportunity to jack up local tax bills. But up next, Texans take center stage in Chicago. Could high-profile exposure at the DNC improve Democratic prospects in the solidly red Lone Star State?
Kamala Harris cares. She will never risk lives for the sake of politics. And she's leading the charge to protect our communities from extreme weather. The Biden-Harris administration have announced at least $1 billion to help us with just that. And Houston is thriving.
In the NFL, we had a term for guys like Donald Trump and my opponent, Ted Cruz. Me guys. You know the type. Talk a big game, only care about themselves, but you don't want to be stuck with them at a barbecue.
Texans Colin Allred and Lena Hidalgo on the big stage at the DNC last week, enjoying a little national limelight. Gotta say, I'm pretty sure plenty of folks here would take issue with Hidalgo's claim that Houston is thriving because of federal aid. That aside, lots of noteworthy moments at the DNC. Oprah, Michelle Obama, and of course, number 44.
We do not need 4 more years of bluster
and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse.
But depending on your perspective, that soundbite could be aimed at either of the last two presidents. All right, Sue, I want to hear more. You know, any other takes on the DNC?
No, again, conventions by design are not really meant to go out and win campaigns. They're meant for people to be able to come and speak, be seen, be introduced, and they did a good job. I thought both Obamas gave very good speeches. You know, she spoke to the crowd, to the House, and he spoke to the nation. I thought Oprah was very interesting, and I thought it was interesting she wore the color purple, which I thought was for the movie, but actually she's an independent.
Right.
So I thought that's symbolic. I'm standing here, I'm purple, but I'm here, and I'm going to vote for them, you know, was a very subtle message.
Okay, Gary, you've been around a few campaigns.
Yeah.
This is now going to be who can get their voters out.
That's part of it, and I also think that, look, if Kamala is allowed to run a functional equivalent of the basement campaign, which so far they have, she may be able to slide for 70 days. And then we're voting on personality and likability and not issues. So if they can make it that, then the Democrats are going to win because they're more likable. But I think there's enough time for the Republican side to get its act together. I thought that Kennedy's endorsement was a significant game changer. And you noticed the Democrats dominated the news for 4 days, and I don't know whether the Kennedy thing was orchestrated to happen on Friday, where it stole all the news from the Democrats, and now it was in the hands of Trump and Kennedy. So that could be an interesting factor as we go forward.
Okay, Marcus, you have everyday contact with people. Is there a lot of excitement out there on Team Harris?
I have seen and heard a lot of excitement to, well, first of all, let me shout out to the purple, because I did appreciate the independent on the stage with the independent voice as an independent, right? But yes, there's a lot of excitement. And to Gary's point, because yes, the Democrats do appear to be more likable, but that's not hard. That's not hard at all. If you look at the other side of the ticket, you have a deceitful, lying adulterer who adulterates with porn stars as their candidate. This is America. What are we doing? This shouldn't even be a landslide. It shouldn't be, what's the word, a Donnybrook. Because we have a person who stood in front of America and inspired the United States Capitol to be taken down. And we're questioning, who do we vote for?
Got about 15 seconds, Paul.
I think the most important Texan speaking at the DNC was actually former Representative Adam Kinzinger, former Republican, or I think he still identifies as a Republican. And he did a great job, I think, of coming out and explaining and giving a lane for people who I think look up to him and the position he took. I think he was critical, and I appreciated that.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Up next, perspective on the DNC from the Republican opposition. Congressman Randy Weber is live in studio to make the case for Team Trump. Across our state and across this country, Republicans watched this week's Democratic National Convention, no doubt gauging the rhetoric, the enthusiasm, and the challenging task ahead. That is convincing Americans Donald Trump and the GOP offer a better way. Joining me this morning for an opportunity to make that case, Congressman Randy Weber. It's good to have you back, sir.
Thank you, Greg. Good to be here.
Okay, why should Americans vote for Donald Trump?
Well, you actually watched Kamala Harris lay out the case for why. She actually never talked about things that mattered. She talked some about the border. She talked some about it. She didn't talk any about energy or inflation. So she's actually talking about securing the border like Donald Trump did. And the question is, why didn't she do that? She's been there 3.5 years. She used Donald Trump's name more than the word inflation, economy, the border. She talked some about the border. She literally is laying out a path that Donald Trump is on. And so it's kind of interesting to watch her mimic what he's doing.
Okay, you served with Donald Trump. Do you believe he can create a better economy than we have right now? Because it used to be that was what Ann Richards used to say, a Democrat, getting down to the lick log is who can provide a better life for Americans.
Right. Well, obviously he can. He's focused on energy. As you know, Kamala and the Democrats think that fossil fuel energy is our enemy. We ought to be using it. We ought to be refining permitting process. We ought to be energy independent, energy dominant. As you know, Texas leads the nation in that. My District 14 has 7 ports. We produce a lot of energy. And for the Democrats to try to want to kill fossil fuels is pointless. And Donald Trump will get our energy back on track. We'll be energy independent, energy dominant. Listen, Greg, energy independence actually means energy security. It means national security. It means job security, family security. I could go right down the list. Trump is on that process. He also had the border secure, too. And what did Biden do? Biden Harris come in day one, and they reversed everything he was doing.
If you could sit down over a cup of coffee with folks in Georgia and Pennsylvania for like 5 minutes, what would you tell them?
Well, exactly that, and that is that we need to be focused on energy and producing more energy, and on business, dealing with our inflation problem, getting Americans back to the level where they've got some spending money, because right now, as you know, there's a lot of people in a lot of hurt. The car industry is suffering. The housing industry is suffering. Americans are suffering, and it's because of the Biden-Harris. She wants to put in price controls, for example. Don't they know from history that those don't work? President Trump had us there. He will come in. We were feared and revered around the world. Harris talked about they were friends of Israel. She's not a friend of Israel. Biden and Harris withheld arms when Israel needed it really bad. So I think when people look at what's happening geopolitical around the world and right here in the United States, Ronald Reagan had a great quote when he ran against Jimmy Carter, and that was this: "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" And I think the American people look at the Biden-Harris, plan. They're not better off than they were 4 years ago.
Quickly, former President Trump said he believes that the slowing of crossings is temporary, that folks down south are waiting to see who wins. You agree with that?
Well, sure, and I'll tell you this real quick, Greg, if I can. When you bring in 300,000 across the border, I say bring in, they came in illegally. If 20% of those are kids, 60,000, you just brought in somewhere between 6 to 10 complete school districts. Somebody has to pay to educate. Guess who that is? It's us. We can't afford that.
Congressman, always good to have you.
Thank you, Greg.
All right, when we come back, RFK Jr., the top independent in this year's run for the White House, suspends his campaign and throws his support to the former president.
We need to stop losing children, mothers, sisters, because now I get to grieve every single day. Every milestone that hits gets harder because she's not there for it. She was gonna be a 7th grader. She had her whole life ahead of her. Her whole life ahead of her, and it was viciously taken away by 2 evil, heinous monsters.
That's Houstonian Alexis Nungary, mother of Jocelyn Nungary, the 12-year-old raped and murdered by 2 undocumented Venezuelan predators, cut loose by Biden policies after crossing the border. Alexis was in Arizona to announce her support for Donald Trump, and as it turns out, she wasn't alone. Less than 24 hours later, independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy offered his endorsement to the former president.
We are aligned with each other on other key issues like ending the forever wars, ending the childhood disease epidemics, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, getting the U.S. intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans.
Panel, what do you make of Kennedy's decision to throw in with Team Trump? Will it matter? I'm going to start with you, Holly. 30 seconds.
Yeah. So I think these 2 endorsements, especially Alexis Nungary, were very powerful, and they are designed to appeal to those about 15% of voters who are still kind of undecided and trying to figure out which direction to go. And in both cases, they talked about policy, and I think it really hit home to think about this family that will grieve for the rest of their lives over this senseless, terrible murder. And this is one of the key issues for Americans. It is border security and what's happening with that. All those people who are coming across the border unvetted, they're being released into the country. We don't know who they are and we don't know where they're going. And often this ends in tragedy. With the Kennedy endorsement, likewise, he's talking about a lot of the concerns we've had, especially since COVID, with some of the state's actions to censor people and to tamp down on disagreements about how to react to the pandemic.
Paul, by necessity, you represent crime victims. How effective was an Alexis endorsement to folks who may not have been engaged in the political process?
I think she spoke passionately. I think she spoke on topic, and I think she probably moved quite a few votes because she represents what so many parents fear, which is being a victim of a policy gone awry. I think she did a wonderful job. She's only a couple of months out from losing her beautiful daughter, and it pained me to see her there, but I'm also thankful that she had the strength to do it.
All right, I've got to give Marcus Davis an opportunity to talk about this issue because there we have an independent who's breaking one way or the other.
Yeah, and you know, it's unfortunate. You know, my condolences to her and her family losing a child. I can't imagine it, and I can't imagine having to be put in a position where I've got to talk about this thing regarding my child. But nonetheless, I will say this. Yeah, and I agree with you, Holly. Immigration is very important, which is why Joe Biden should have never have reversed Trump's policy when he got in office, which is also why Trump should not have issued that hard rule to the Republicans to not get this bill done that was authored by a conservative, right? And it doesn't matter whether it was a good bill or not. He didn't do it because it wasn't a good bill. He didn't do it because he didn't want legislation to be passed while he was not in office. And we don't know how many people snuck through the back door over the last 12 months while that legislation was not passed.
Okay, Gary, quickly.
We'll talk about that
bill was horrible. Okay,
it was authored by GOP, and
it would have made things worse, not better.
They were going to let thousands in every day, and then we reached the limit. We're going to close the border. It was a joke. This was a feel-good bill. You know, the Democrats are really good at putting titles on bills and saying, "Isn't it wonderful?" Inflation Reduction Act being an example. And
it was a conservative piece of legislation. It came from a conservative.
Hey guys,
one U.S. senator who was involved with the Republicans. But it was a bad bill.
Got to go to break. I promise we're going to talk more about this. I promise we'll talk more. When we come back, Harris County commissioners prepare for some sticker shock on next year's tax bill. Did I say commissioners? Homeowners. We're talking the heavy weather loophole that's allowing Lena Hidalgo and company to boost what you pay without your permission. I guess you could call it a double whammy for anyone who owns property in Harris County. First came the destruction and subsequent cost of both the derecho and Hurricane Beryl, triggering extensive out-of-pocket expenses, even for those with insurance. Now we're learning those storms may have triggered a different kind of cost for home and business owners. Turns out lawmakers in Austin granted an exemption on non-voter approved tax hikes above the state-imposed cap of 3.5% to counties which have experienced a recent disaster. Precinct 3's Tom Ramsey says his Democratic colleagues on Commissioners Court have already decided to take full advantage and raise property taxes for next year a full 8% without asking voters for permission.
They want to go through with an 8% increase in your taxes, which is $268 million more dollars than we had this year. Let me put that another way. We were able to fund all of our programs this year, take care of all of our business this year, do everything that we need to do this year, but we need another $268 million. We have a spending problem in Harris County, not a revenue problem in Harris County.
Panel Ramsey fears the additional $250 million in revenue will be spent on social programs and not on improving weather resilience or vital infrastructure. Sue Lovell, what do you make of this?
So this was the legislature, right? They voted the Republican-controlled legislature.
They left the loophole in.
What were you thinking? I mean, seriously, what were you thinking? That you were going to pass this? Now comes down, and now the Democratic controlled commissioner, Republican commissioners criticizing. I'm not for this either. But look, why in the heck would you give them that kind of power? At least say take it to the voters. I mean, it's wrong. I hope they vote it down. Asking them to vote it down. We have been through a lot, and an 8% increase is crushing.
All right, Gary. So here's what happened. In order to pass the legislation, you had rural legislators who were concerned if we had a hurricane that there would be costs to the government because of the hurricane, because there could be collateral damage. Fortunately, the county did not suffer a lot of collateral damage. It was mostly individuals in the borough in the hurricane that we had. So that's how this bill came about. Now that's not a good thing. It becomes a loophole. It's the irresponsibility of the Democrats on the Commissioners Court who said, well, we don't have any additional damage because of Hurricane Beryl, but we want more money to spend because we know how to spend your money better than you. And that's what's going on here. And they will spend it on social programs and while they neglect the jail and other core items.
Paul, at a time when folks are dealing with inflation, we got a huge HISD bond issue. We've got an issue before the voters in terms of providing additional funding for flood control. They could get spiked because this is being imposed on them. Voters don't have a say.
Yeah, so this is a discipline issue. There were a few years where the values of existing properties had shot up like 10, 12%. In 23, they only went up 1%. So that affected their ability to tax. On top of that, there's ARPA money that came from COVID that is dissipating, going away. And so they're having to backfill those dollars, and they didn't get the normal tax hike that they would have gotten through increased valuations. And so they had to do something about it. Now they're doing this. I think it's a bad idea. It should be voted down.
Holly, you cover county government. What's going on here?
Well, you mentioned the ARPA dollars that came into the county, almost $1 billion. And what did they spend it on? A lot of new social programs that are quote unquote temporary, such as the guaranteed basic income program they're trying to push through once again, that would give $500 stipends to select residents. There's also free childcare and a whole slew of social programs. And they promised a couple of years ago, Lena Hidalgo said, we're going to have to figure out a way to pay for these programs to continue them after the federal dollars are expired. And this is obviously going to be the path.
Marcus Davis, this is coming out of your pocket. You own lots of property.
Listen, I can't believe some of the stuff that I'm hearing. But Paul laid it out great, and Holly was kind of right. But Gary, I don't know.
He's right.
How look, Sue said it right. This was legislation that was authored by the GOP. So if it's irresponsible for the Democrats to use it, then it was irresponsible for the GOP to create it. That's the equivalent of a parent leaving a gun on the counter and the kid shooting someone, and you're saying, well, come on, guys. Everybody has to hold their own in terms of responsibility. Now, I am not against social programs. Child care is a very important thing to hardworking men and women who just cannot simply afford it. I don't agree with handouts of minimum $500 guaranteed, all that kind of good stuff. So I'm not opposed to social programs. I'm opposed to irresponsible social programs, and I'm opposed to using loopholes in order to and finagling things in order to get it.
We're almost through with the segment. The argument is you got to take care of the fundamentals first. Right. What counties were formed, organized to do, the fundamental responsibilities.
Not look for extras.
Hold on. I love this enthusiasm. We got to go to break. Still to come, fixing what's broken at Houston's embattled police department. In the wake of scandal, a prescription presented to repair performance and earn back lost public trust. But up next, protest over a plan to buy a private toll road with public money and then keep charging taxpayers to use it. Double taxation. That's how Houston area State Senator Mays Middleton and other Republican lawmakers see a plan by TxDOT to purchase a private tollway on Highway 288 for $1.7 billion, and then continue to charge tolls to the Texas taxpayers who are picking up the tab for the acquisition. State Representative Briscoe Cain called TxDOT's tax and toll scheme ridiculous. Our friend Bill King said to me this week, anyone who ever thinks governments, Democrats or Republicans, will stop charging on tollways is at best misguided. Panel, this appears to be a prime example. Holly, the Texan wrote about this. What's going on?
Yeah, so my colleague Kim Roberts has been covering this for several weeks now, even before these lawmakers got involved, so kudos to her. But yeah, this is just shocking, right? We're always told we're going to have these toll roads, they're going to pay for themselves, eventually we're going to eliminate the tolls. It never happens. Even Harris County's Toll Road Authority, you know, is bringing in lots of dollars. They've funneled off those dollars to the county for other things now. We're still paying tolls, even though we did get a little reduction. Why the state is doing this is just beyond comprehension, and it is double taxation. So we're paying for the billions to buy it, and we're going to continue to pay to ride on it.
Quickly, Gary.
This is ridiculous.
Explain this, sir.
Yeah, I will tell you.
Explain the GOP's action.
Well, it's lining the pockets of the private people who put the money in, and now they're going to get their money out much quicker. Right. And they got the revenue coming in while they've had the toll road operating. But this makes no sense to me. It's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. And I agree with the Republican legislators. They need to shut this clown show down.
You agree with the Republican legislators that they need to shut this down, but let me remind you, TxDOT is governed by a 5-minute Texas Transportation Commission, which is appointed by the governor of the state of Texas. You cannot praise.
Bear some responsibility.
You cannot praise the Republicans for standing up against this when this is a Republican-created problem.
I said the Republican legislators. Okay. Not the TxDOT.
The Chronicle thinks that they spent $600 million building it. Blue Ridge says they spent $1.1 billion, and we're going to pay $1.7 billion for it. The math doesn't work out. It doesn't make sense. They're going to cash out. They're doing everything they should be saying, oh, well, here's where. When you look at what's happening, it's because there's only 3,000 people a day riding it. It costs $18 one way to ride that stupid tollway. And on the other side, instead of 3,000, the Katy Freeway, which brings in bank, is taking 20,000 riders a day. Whoa. So that's what it's down to. They're not making enough money.
Marcus, our friend Charles Blaine, I think, put some video on Twitter of the actual vote. There was zero discussion of this.
That's right. You know, and that is a miscarriage of justice, right? But this is another example of the state of Texas taking advantage of its citizenry and not standing up for and fighting for its citizens.
All right,
kind of like when they froze our ass off.
It's wrong. So they can charge whatever they want.
We're all unified.
Okay, still ahead. The nation's largest children's hospital under fire from a whistleblower who says the institution delivered gender-affirming medical care to kids and then lied about it.
This provider would prescribe cross-sex hormones at regular visits to healthy minors, to healthy children who were very confused about their sex. And he would affirm the false identities they had adopted. And in my view, he would convince parents that this was the absolute best course of treatment for their confused child.
A second potentially devastating whistleblower has emerged alleging physicians at Texans Children's Hospital continued to prescribe powerful trans-sex hormones to kids under the age of 18 after the medical system publicly announced it had stopped and after the Texas legislature banned the treatments as a matter of law. Nurse Vanessa Sivage worked within the specialty clinic and is corroborating documents made public by former TCH doctor Ethan Heim, which appear to prove the illegal gender-affirming treatment for kids secretly continued.
And for a doctor to advise parent and child alike that a hormone will solve their inner turmoil or their issue, whatever it may be, is egregious and horrific, and it's child abuse. And so I knew I had to come forward to expose that.
Panel, Sivage says her request to transfer out of the clinic because of her religious beliefs was denied, and she was instead fired earlier this month. And has since alleged Texas Children's has billed Medicaid for juvenile gender-affirming care, a claim the health system says it's investigating. A lot to unpack there, Holly. I know you follow this.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. That's a good way to put it, and there is an investigation underway. This is just horrifying, and I'm not going to horrify our watchers this morning. morning with the details of what is actually involved in the so-called gender-affirming care. It is mutilation. It brings a lifetime of pain and suffering to a lot of these people, and these young people under 18, they certainly do not have the wherewithal to be able to make this life-altering decision that is going to render them sterile. It's going to mean a lifetime of treatment, and I just don't understand the motivation of continuing to push this on these children who, in often cases, need a different kind of treatment for mental difficulties.
Sue, any thoughts here?
You know, I haven't really followed this, but I've always said that, you know, this is it's very difficult and for parents and for the child, but that I believe that it's the child should be able to make the decision by allowing them to become adults and then decide what they want to have happen to themselves, not the parents making the decision.
Yeah. Marcus, this is, I can't imagine being a parent in this situation. Thoughts here?
Yeah, I want to make sure we highlight that this is a very sensitive situation for parents to handle. And I can't tell them how to run their household, but I can say my dad had a saying for me. He said, you can do whatever you want to when you're out of my house and you're 18 years old. And I'm not trying to make light of the situation. I know it's hard. A parent wants to do the best that they can, the most that they can for their child. But I know for a fact that as a parent, my 10-year-old is not going, I'm not going to allow my 10-year-old to make a life-altering decision for themselves. I have to be the parent for them. I have to love them through this situation. I have to counsel them through this situation. I've got to get them the best therapeutic help that I can, and then allow them to be an adult and decide for themselves what they do. And shout out to the whistleblower that brought it to light.
Okay, got to go. Up next, 250,000 criminal cases kicked to the curb by Houston's police department without investigation. This week, a recipe revealed to make sure it never happens again.
I just want the public to know we're doing everything we can. I won't rest until these recommendations are implemented. And I got a police chief that feels the same way.
Mayor John Whitmire marking what all of us hope is a new era of law enforcement accountability at the Houston Police Department. Following the revelation that more than 250,000 alleged crimes were quietly shelved and ignored without investigation, among the recommendations, establishment of a case management unit in every investigative division, vastly increasing civilian staff, mandating audits of suspended cases, complete replacement of an outdated records management system, and retraining of those in command position. Panel, the common thread here, every single upgrade, especially the additional personnel, will cost money and lots of it. Do you think Houstonians are prepared to make the investment? Paul, I want to get your take on this.
Yeah, so this is about priorities, first order things. And when I looked over what the recommendations are, one of the things that stood out to me is this is the lack of communication within a large bureaucracy. Why does that happen? People don't have time. A lot of the things that were recommended had to do with training and interdepartmental communication. When there aren't people talking to one another about what needs to be happening, well-intended policies such as creating this code, you know, becomes something that's terrible and unmanageable, and people start using these back doors to get around hard work. We have the same number of police officers we had, I think, 14 years ago, and we haven't beefed up the civilians that are responsible for the things like outreach to victims. Those are things that were identified. Mayor Whitmire did speak, text me, he said, hey, we're on the right track, we're working on these things, and I appreciate that.
All right, you work in the criminal justice system. Can this help, and should we pay for it?
Well, I guess it's about priorities, and the problem we've had, this is not a new discussion. We've been talking about it, Sue's been talking about this for years, that the police department was understaffed in critical positions, that we weren't taking care of our business, that our response time for our police for critical emergencies is really pretty weak. Now, it's not like the city's still growing, but you know, you go back 10 years ago, we were under-policed, we're still under-policed. The problem is that we've had leadership at City Hall that's taken the city into other areas, kind of like the adventures the county commissioners are going on, spending money on non-core items. And so they do those things, and there's constituencies that like it. But here,
The city doesn't have the money to spend what they need to do here unless they take it from other areas. Of course, they could go and take their money back from Metro, which we have suggested on this program numerous times, but it needs to be done. We know cases are ignored. I mean, I know from dealing in the courthouse, even cases that are filed, you say, who did this work? Where did this come from? I mean, the truth is, as a criminal defense lawyer, you don't win many cases if the police have really done their job thoroughly. But they've been feeding out of a fire hose given the number of cases they get, so they do the best they can under the circumstances. And that's how we get our situation where we can get rid of cases, but it also creates problems in making cases, which they need to have the resources to do.
Okay, we're going to talk more about it in overtime. We got to. Okay? Because when you break trust and then say, oh, but give us a lot more money to fix it,
which we don't say for schools, which has always amazed me.
All right, still ahead. After the better part of a decade waiting for a pay raise, Harris County's elected constables finally get some relief. On tonight's edition of Texas, The Issue Is, airing at 9:45 right here on Fox 26. We're taking a hard look at the DNC and the merit of the messaging it aimed at America's voters.
MAGA holds legislation hostage here at home. Critical resources to secure the border, military aid to Ukraine, and even the Farm Bill. She's lived the American dream while he's been America's nightmare.
And worthy of note, it was a big week for Harris County's elected constables who appealed their salaries to a citizen review board and won their first substantial raise in years.
It tells you that my leadership from the county perspective was not, they did not see a value. And, you know, not having a pay raise for 9 years, it was time that we, as all 8 of us, stood up and actually filed a grievance where a committee could actually talk about all the things that have gone on over the last 9 years. And
all right, our own Holly Hansen broke that story. What's going on here?
So the constables actually were not only not getting a raise, they were making less than their second in command. So the second in command is making significantly more than they were. They've appealed repeatedly to Commissioner's Court. Commissioner's Court has not been particularly friendly towards our constables. In fact, they would probably like to eliminate the constables altogether. But what they did is appeal to this salary grievance committee. Under state code, you can assemble this committee of residents in the county, and these residents ran the spectrum. It was a super interesting hearing, and they voted unanimously to award these constables with a pay increase that was commensurate with the difference between the sheriff and his second in command. So, and they're not even making as much as the sheriff's second in command. So, but they got this little bump, and I think it reflects on the fact that the citizens appreciate their constables. They appreciate the law enforcement officers in their community. They see these guys out there and they see the work that they do to try to keep the community safe.
Well done. Thanks to this week's panel, and thank you for joining us. The conversation continues on a national level next on Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream, and we'll keep talking here with What's Your Point Overtime, streaming live on fox26houston.com and on our free Fox Local app for your smart TV. From all of us here, have a safe and healthy week.